My name is Dan Doyle. Good afternoon. I'm with the Regional Water Authority, and thank you all so much for joining us today for the first of the RWA's Water-Wise Ways for a Healthy Lawn webinar series. Today, you're going to be hearing from Julius Duncan from the EPA's WaterSense group. I really appreciate everyone joining today. It's such an important subject. As we all know, water is a precious natural resource, and we all must do our part to preserve and protect it. At the Regional Water Authority, we own and protect about 27,000 acres of watershed land, and that's where we source the drinking water that comes out of your tap when you turn it on at home. And one of the ways that folks at home like yourselves can help protect that water source is to use water wisely. Particularly, we find in the summer months, water use increases. And while the RWA, we have a very healthy water supply, we're actually right now well over the average where we typically are this time of year. But it's still important to reduce unnecessary water use. And we find that in the summer, approximately 40% of the water that gets used is outdoors. And that's to water the lawns, water your gardens, clean up your house, your car, things like that. And there's a lot of great ways that you can sort of save the environment and save water by reducing unnecessary use and still keeping those lawns and gardens green. At the end of this presentation, find that there's anything you want to ask that wasn't answered, anything like that. You can send us an email. You can reach us at waterviews@rwater.com. That's WATERVIEWS@rwater.com. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Julius to begin the presentation. Julius?
All right, thank you, Dan. And I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Well, thanks everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Julius Duncan. I am the environmental engineer for the EPA WaterSense program. I've been there for the past 5 years working on our outdoors and technical areas. I have helped to develop different materials for irrigation professionals as well as homeowners that are both educational materials and marketing materials that help to identify water efficient products and can also help you learn more about how to use some of these water efficient products. What we'll be going over today is an introduction to the WaterSense program, outdoor water use trends. I'll also talk about some landscape and irrigation best practices, native plants, which is really important, especially as we start thinking about doing more gardening this time of year. And then, as I mentioned, some of those resources that I've helped develop and some of the resources we have in general on the WaterSense website, I'll go through a few of those as well. So starting off, I want to give a quick intro of the WaterSense program, which is a voluntary program launched by the EPA in 2006. WaterSense works to promote water efficiency so we can help organizations and consumers save water for future generations. The WaterSense label provides a simple way for consumers and businesses to identify water efficient products, programs, practices, and homes. Products earning the WaterSense label have been independently certified for water efficiency and performance. The label is reserved for products that reduce water use by at least 20% and perform as well or better than standard models. In addition to labeling products, homes, and certification programs for irrigation professionals, we try to approach water efficiency from many angles. We label water efficient products so that consumers and businesses can easily identify products that will save them water. We've developed best management practices for areas such as commercial buildings and landscapes to help facilities design, operate, and maintain their buildings and landscapes as efficiently as possible. And we have partners around the country that help pass along the message of water efficiency. There's a wide variety of residential and commercial products eligible for the WaterSense label. The WaterSense label is generally reserved for products that use at least 20% less water and perform as well or better than standard models, as I mentioned a little earlier. As of 2020 and 2021, actually, we have more than 37,000 product models that have earned the WaterSense label. Our newest labeled product expands the category of irrigation controllers. Soil moisture-based irrigation controllers are now eligible for the label, and they work by taking direct measurements of the water available in the soil and determine whether to allow or bypass an irrigation cycle. In addition to these product categories, we also work closely with Energy Star to include water factors in their specifications and for them to consider water savings or for us to consider energy savings in ours. In May, we're highlighting sprinkler spruce up. We use sprinkler spruce up as a reminder that at the beginning of the irrigation season, it's important to check your system for anything that could cause water waste. Over the winter, pipes may have experienced freezing weather, potentially causing cracks and breaks. Similarly, sprinklers may have been broken or knocked out of place. That's why our slogan is inspect, connect, direct, and select. You should inspect your system for breaks and leaks, connect pipes that may have disconnected, direct sprinklers towards the landscape and away from the sidewalk, and select a WaterSense labeled irrigation controller for a smarter irrigation schedule. Starting up the irrigation season is the perfect time to walk through your landscape and identify areas of potential water loss. This guide by WaterSense, which is available on the WaterSense website, provides a checklist of the things to look for in your landscape. Pipe leaks and broken sprinklers may leak water underground and can be difficult to identify immediately. You can run the irrigation cycle and check for areas where puddles may be forming. It's also beneficial to turn sprinkler heads away from hardscapes like sidewalks and driveways. The guide also covers plant choices and how they can be monitored to reduce water waste. When you find issues in the landscape, make a note of the location and call an irrigation professional to fix it. Next, I'll go over some outdoor water use trends and why it's important to save water. Saving water is important because the risk of drought has been a concern for many years. The chart on the slide here shows the years from 2000 to 2020 for drought monitoring in Connecticut. The darkest red areas are the years with the most severe drought, which looks to occur every 5 to 10 years. But more commonly, nearly every year is showing evidence of mild to moderate drought, which can still severely limit available water sources. It's important to look at outdoor water use when considering ways to be more water efficient. Outdoor water use is a primary driver of peak use for utilities. Water providers must size their systems to meet peak demand. This capacity is not used very often, so seasonal water use that contributes to peak demand is a very attractive target for jurisdictions trying to bring down their peak demand. Because of this, outdoor water use is typically the first to be restricted during droughts or other shortages. By reducing the water demand for your facility, water providers, which typically size their water system based on peak demand use, are less burdened by keeping water at capacity. Outdoor water use restrictions are also visible and easy to monitor. Jurisdictions can enforce any restrictions because they can drive around and see water being used in the open. Finally, using higher volumes of water can trigger higher water rates. Many utilities also use increasing block rates, where the incremental cost goes up with increased usage. So using larger volumes of water can be very costly. Because of this, your outdoor water use can contribute to placing your facility in a higher water rate tier that will cost you more money each month. You also want to protect your investment in plants by using the correct amount of water so your plants are not overwatered. Because of the way water rates are structured, you may be paying for water twice, so any wasted water can make a big impact. The water rate is charged based on the amount of water supplied. The sewer charge is normally an estimate of how much of that water that was used outdoors could have gone to the sewer. This doesn't include the cost of energy that's used to heat that water or pump the water throughout your house. Because of these other costs, the true cost of water can be calculated by combining that water and sewer rates and multiplying it by the volume of water that was used. Then you also add in the fees and other associated costs to get the complete picture. The second point is that using more water can result in other increased operation and maintenance costs. For example, using more hot water in sinks and showers increases the energy costs. And many pieces of irrigation equipment will require more maintenance if you're using them more often. Over time, all these associated costs add up and factor into your total cost of water. Now that we've covered the cost of water use, let's talk about how water is used outdoors. As you may have experienced, water use for irrigation can be significant and can be one of the major culprits for water waste. Outdoor water use for homes comes mainly in the form of irrigation for the landscape. This may be hand watering from a hose, in-ground irrigation systems, or a hose-in sprinkler. Some of you may also wash your car at home from a bucket or a water hose. And finally, during the summer, you may use a pool or spa. In the next section, I'll discuss tips on how you can use water, how water is used in the landscape, and how you can save water. Maintaining healthy plants and soils in the landscape is just as important as using irrigation efficiently. So we'll start out with landscaping. A well-designed landscape will minimize any supplemental water needed from your irrigation system. A healthy soil is the base of the healthy landscape. Your soil impacts the rate of infiltration and how much water is available for the plants. Healthy soil also includes the nutrients plants will need to grow healthy. Slopes should be minimized wherever possible. Large slopes are prone to erosion, removing plants, soils, and nutrients from the landscape. If you have flower beds, trees, vegetable gardens, or shrubs, using mulch will help you keep the plants and soils healthy. The cover of mulch helps to cool the soil and reduce water loss from evaporation. As the mulch ages, nutrients are absorbed into the soil to be available for plants to use. Your plant choice will dictate your irrigation schedule. Native and drought tolerant plants are accustomed to the local weather patterns and, after established, don't require much supplemental irrigation outside of rainfall. Additionally, turfgrass area can be minimized to reduce water use. I'll talk about more of those benefits in native plants later in the presentation. Lastly, organize your plants into hydrozones based on uniform water use to avoid overwatering plants. The first step to ensuring you properly operate and maintain your landscape is to hire a landscape professional trained and certified in water efficient or climate appropriate landscaping. As I mentioned in the last slide, your soil is the foundation of your landscape. Healthy soils help develop deep plant root systems and allow water to properly infiltrate. Maintain good topsoil that captures rain as it falls and releases water back to plants over time. Poor or fast draining soils can benefit from soil amendments to attain proper water holding capacity. Adding mulch to plant beds keeps soils cool and minimizes evaporation. Organic mulches can add nutrients to the soil as they decompose. And if parts of your landscape undergo regular foot traffic, be sure to aerate those areas regularly to improve water infiltration. If you use drought tolerant and climate appropriate plants and materials, you may not need to apply as much supplemental irrigation to maintain your landscape quality. These types of plants can require less time and cost to maintain as well. Smaller turf areas can reduce resources and costs associated with watering, mowing, and fertilizing. Avoid using strip grass entirely since it's difficult to water without overspraying. You can install shade trees since shading reduces watering requirements of covered plants. Consider your soil type, exposure to sun and wind, and grading when planting new plants. Your landscape should be designed by grouping plants according to their water needs to promote efficient irrigation in those zones that do require supplemental water. That's hydrozoning. If you have a graded area, consider installing rain gardens to capture that stormwater runoff appropriately so that it can soak into the soil rather than becoming runoff. The other part of a healthy landscape is to properly manage irrigation. Once you've designed your landscape to reduce your water requirement, you should use irrigation products that deliver water the most efficiently. Experts estimate that up to 50% of water used for irrigation is lost due to wind, evaporation, and overwatering. Poor irrigation system design, improper installation, lack of maintenance, and improper scheduling can contribute to this water loss. And the next few slides we'll cover today will hopefully help you avoid some of these common mistakes. Since your irrigation schedule dictates your water use, consider replacing your existing timer-based controllers with demand-based controllers. Weather-based irrigation controllers adjust your irrigation schedule based on local weather factors. Soil moisture-based controllers bypass the irrigation cycle when water in the soil is already sufficient. Attaching rain sensors also bypass irrigation when it isn't needed. You can also add on wind and freeze sensors, which will override scheduled waterings if weather conditions aren't right. High wind conditions can blow water from sprinklers away from the intended area, possibly landing on sidewalks or the street. You can also optimize your irrigation system hardware to help you use less water. You may want to consider replacing your sprinklers with the more efficient WaterSense labeled spray sprinkler bodies with integral pressure regulation. If the incoming water pressure is too high, sprinklers can experience misting and overspraying, which wastes water. These sprinkler bodies correct that incoming water pressure to a range best suited for the sprinkler heads. If you replace sprinkler heads, make sure there is head-to-head coverage. That is, water from one spray head is reaching but not spraying past surrounding spray heads. This helps improve distribution uniformity. And the image that's on this slide shows an illustration of head-to-head coverage. Consider installing drip irrigation around trees, shrubs, and plant beds. These emission devices deliver water right at the root zone, so less water is lost to evaporation and wind. Waterways can hinder your water efficiency efforts. Throughout the irrigation season, check for water spray that is landing on hardscapes. Leaks, check for broken sprinkler heads, and fix those as well. If you see any pooling or puddling in your landscape, check for a leak in your irrigation system. Installing meters can help indicate inefficiencies or system leaks. If you have a water meter or sub-meter installed, read them at least monthly and analyze those water use trends. From a system maintenance perspective, be sure to audit your irrigation system periodically to identify system deficiencies. You can find a list of irrigation professionals who've been certified by one or more WaterSense labeled program in the WaterSense directory of certified professionals. I'll talk more about irrigation professionals on the next couple slides. To best address irrigation water use, you can hire a qualified irrigation professional. WaterSense labels certification programs which test irrigation professionals on water efficient technologies and techniques. Hiring an irrigation professional certified through a labeled program can ensure that your irrigation system is designed, operated, and maintained with water efficiency in mind. When hiring an irrigation professional, consider which type of certified professional you may need. Designers can design a water efficient irrigation system, creating zones with similar water requirements, ensuring head to head coverage, and selecting the right type of spray device for each part of your landscape. Installation and maintenance professionals, sometimes simply called irrigation contractors, may install the system laid out by the designer. They may also manage the system tasks like weatherizing it for the off season, checking for leaks and overspray on startup, replacing broken heads, setting your controller schedule, and some of the other maintenance items. Irrigation auditors audit irrigation systems. Your system can be audited after installation to ensure the installed system meets the design intent. You probably also want to ensure your system is audited periodically. Auditors will suggest ways to maximize your distribution uniformity and point out needed areas of maintenance and schedule improvements. To learn more about irrigation professionals certified by a WaterSense labeled program, you can visit the WaterSense website along with the two links that are provided here, both for the professional certification programs and the finding irrigation professionals. As I mentioned, native plants are an important landscape choice for reducing the need for additional irrigation. In this section, I'll cover the resources WaterSense has available for learning more about choosing native plants. A native plant is a species that's grown in the region without human introduction. In the US, each region has its own climate, topography, geographic features, and soil. This wide variety of features means there is no one size fits all approach to selecting plants. Native plants have grown accustomed to the region and are more adapted to local weather patterns. For example, plants in Western states can survive in the hot, arid environment with little to no rainfall for long stretches of time. Bringing those plants to the East Coast with cooler temperatures and higher rainfall would be out of their natural environment. Because native plants have developed based on their local environment, they're less likely to need supplemental irrigation, which will save you money. Native plants are more suited to local conditions and require less fertilizers and pesticides that could run off into lakes and rivers in the watershed. There are about 20,000 native plant species in the country and range from hot desert environments, cool temperate climates, and sub-zero temperatures. Searching for the most appropriate plant can be a challenge. So the WaterSense website has put together a catalog of links for native plants. Each of the links go to external websites where local and regional organizations have information on which native plants are best suited. When searching for native plants, keep a few things in mind. Your climate zone may change based on your state or even the city you live in. The USDA has a hardiness zone map that characterizes each city based on temperature extremes and matches that with plants that can withstand those extremes. Your local soil is another factor. Test your soil for salinity, composition, and pay attention to how it changes with depth. And finally, be aware of invasive species in plants. Planting invasive species can quickly grow out of hand and cause damage to the local environment. The search tool on the WaterSense website is very useful. You can search for your specific state in the search bar. Also, if you search for nationwide, it will pull up websites with databases for all states. Or for a more general search, use the term for the resources that specifically go over native plants. Here's two examples of what you'll find searching for native plants. On the left is an example from the Connecticut Botanical Society. They provide a description of the plant, how much sun is necessary, water use, soil type, and even the best practices for planting. On the right is for the Chesapeake Bay region, with an example of good plant choice for the DC, Maryland, and Virginia region. Our landscape photo gallery on the WaterSense website has some great photographs of sites around the country. They include examples of how people have used native plants, water efficient irrigation, and sustainable landscaping to create attractive landscapes. Native plants are a great addition to rain gardens and planter boxes as well. They require less water to establish the plants and can survive on the local amount of rainfall. Green infrastructure designs mimic the natural environment to increase infiltration and decrease runoff. They can be used to reduce the hardscaped area around a building. The goal is to slow it down, soak it in, and spread it out. For example, planter boxes can replace strip grass between the sidewalk and the street to capture runoff that would normally go to storm drain. Rain gardens use native plants in healthy soils to capture rainfall and runoff and allow it to naturally seep into the soil. And the final section covers the resources we have available on the WaterSense website. We update the website with new resources often, so check back regularly. The WaterSense website has several case studies focused on outdoor water use. Our newest case study highlights an apartment complex in Albuquerque, New Mexico, that replaced their old irrigation equipment with water efficient irrigation products. With the help of their local extension agency, they were able to keep the cost to the HOA down. Our case studies focus on residential, commercial, and city landscapes. These reports are great for irrigation professionals looking to institute new ideas into their projects. For water providers, some of these reports can be useful in incorporating these practices into your own efforts. They also highlight innovative approaches to addressing irrigation. For example, the Taking a Bird's Eye View of La Rinconada Country Club also used a drone to take daily images of the total landscape around the country club, and it would highlight all of the areas in that landscape that were dealing with either overwatering, underwatering, or needed immediate attention. The irrigation manager could then identify those areas quickly and respond appropriate on a daily basis. Other helpful guides for outdoor water management include the WaterSense Water Smart Landscapes Guide, micro irrigation guides, and the checklist for your landscapes that I mentioned earlier. The Water Smart Landscapes Guide covers many of the tips we talked about today, such as plan ahead, use native plants, and plant based on site conditions. We also have two versions of the micro irrigation guide, one for irrigation professionals and one for homeowners. Micro irrigation is beneficial because it provides a low flow rate of irrigation directly to the root zone of plants. The application of water will depend on the plant's needs. Drip line emitters work well for trees and can be shaped to fit the landscape. Micro sprays and point source emitters work well for shrubs that may not be in a direct line. Although developed with residential landscapes in mind, the micro irrigation guides can also be useful for commercial landscapes. Between visits from your irrigation professional, walk through your landscape to check for leaks, broken sprinklers, and other irrigation issues. On our website, we have this checklist you can use that covers all the different irrigation components, landscape features, tips for checking plants, and soil health that you should check for. The end driver of your water use is your irrigation schedule. Irrigation schedule should be updated monthly to account for changing weather conditions. Your landscape will need less water in the spring and fall months than in the high peak of summer. If you don't have a controller that adjusts the schedule for you, you'll want to make sure you do it yourself. Irrigation zones should be scheduled individually based on each zone's watering needs. Consider exposure to sun, wind, plant type, soil type, and your sprinkler type when determining the irrigation schedule for each zone. And if you see any pooling or puddling in your landscape, check for a leak in your irrigation system. All of these tips are available on the Irrigation Controller brochure, Is Your Watering Under Control? It goes into detail on adjusting your schedule based on the season, different irrigation requirements based on zones, and the different types of controller technologies available, both weather-based irrigation controllers and soil moisture-based irrigation controllers, anything that might connect to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and on-demand and timer-based controllers. Now, soil moisture-based irrigation controllers are the newest labeled product by WaterSense. These controllers join our collection of weather-based irrigation controllers as smart tools for scheduling irrigation. Soil moisture sensors work by taking regular measurements of water available in the soil. If the soil already has sufficient water, the sensor will send a signal to the controller to bypass the next scheduled irrigation cycle. If there's no water in the soil or the soil water has reached a minimal threshold, the sensor will allow the next irrigation cycle. These days, more devices come with the capability to connect to Wi-Fi and mobile devices. This gives you the flexibility to view the irrigation data in real time and can adjust the schedule on the go. Sprinkler bodies are the housing that connects the irrigation water supply line and holds the sprinkler head. The internal pressure regulation keeps the sprinkler outlet pressure consistent even when the incoming pressure changes. The result is a more consistent flow rate across the system. Maintaining the pressure also keeps a consistent droplet size that reduces water loss due to misting and overspray. If you're going to replace an old sprinkler body with one that is water efficient, make sure you replace all the sprinklers in that zone to maintain consistent pressure. If you want to get started saving water outdoors right away, here's a few things you can tackle right now. Add mulch and topsoil where appropriate and aerate high traffic areas to increase your soil's water retention and reduce evaporation losses. Allow your turf grass to grow a little higher, promoting deep root growth and more drought resistant turf. The easiest way to reduce water use for irrigation is to adjust your zone by zone schedules regularly to meet plants' needs. And apply cycle and soak scheduling to steep slopes and clay soils, while watering other landscapes less frequently with more volume at each watering. Lastly, check your sprinkler heads to make sure they are aimed appropriately at your landscape instead of hardscapes or other areas, and fix any broken heads. Thank you everyone for attending this presentation. I have posted the contact information for WaterSense here along with our social media, and now we will open it up for a Q&A.
Thank you again, Julius, for the presentation, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So as you heard, it's Julius has some more time to take a few of your questions. If you have a question, you've not asked it yet, go to the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom window and type your question in there, and we'll start moving through these. So Julius, the first question we have for you came in, do you recommend, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong, tall fescue more often than not?
So I am not a plant specialist, but I will say, based on the Native Plants website, if you're able to track that down for, I think it was the Connecticut Botanical Society, they may have more recommendations on even which types of turf grass is most appropriate for Connecticut. I personally would not be able to answer directly which one may be, or which type of grass may be better than another.
Next question is, what are water rate tiers? That's probably not something you're that familiar with. You can find RWA water rates on our website. It's rwater.com, rwater.com. And if you have questions, certainly reach out to us, and we'll be able to get back to you about that. Are soil sensors better than weather, or in parentheses, rain sensors?
So that is another one that's going to be a little more dependent on your site and what specific conditions you may come across. So we have tested both of them, and they basically perform best depending on your site conditions. Soil sensors are good at really getting that on-site conditions. So when it rains, if you have a soil that can retain water a little better and holds that water a little longer, that soil sensor is going to more likely know just how much water is going to be retained in the soil and can potentially skip some of those irrigation cycles. Weather-based controllers work really well as well. They connect to either you can have a sensor directly on your home that can track your rainfall or the evapotranspiration conditions, or they connect to the local weather station, which does a good job of the regional information for rainfall and evapotranspiration. And again, it does the same thing where if it knows that there's been enough rainfall, or especially with weather-based, with those rain and weather-based controllers, they have the smart ones usually have a predictive technology. They know that if it's expected to rain in 2 to 3 days, and you have sufficient soil moisture right now, it does not need to irrigate today. And so it can make some of those adjustments to track your rainfall a little better. So again, it's not necessarily one better than the other, but more of which one is going to be best for your specific site.
All right, and it looks like we have actually a couple more questions about those soil sensors. Does the controller with soil moisture sensor normally have one sensor? This person says they imagine you would have to have different parts of the yard have different, water requirements.
Yeah, and that is absolutely correct. In general, for most of the manufacturers that we have worked with and tested so far, I think the soil sensors are usually packaged individually or sold as an individual. And it does generally depend on just how big your landscape is. A lot of commercial properties are the ones who may have 3 to 5, or if you have something as large as a country club, they may have 10 or more different soil sensors because of the wide range of landscape conditions. Many homes may be able to only need one or sometimes two if you maybe just have a difference in your front yard and your backyard. But if it's usually one of the things they also recommend with soil sensors is to put them in the most representative zone of the landscape that would also be the one that needs the most water. So that way it's pretty much not, so you're guaranteed not to underwater it because that sensor is the one that's most likely to tell your controller that it still needs to water just a little bit more.
Great. And a couple more questions. But one of the things you may have just answered this is how many soil sensors should you install? It sounds like it's the size of your property, but maybe one or two,
It's
depending on.
mostly going to be based on the size of your property. In most cases, it's going to you'll just need one, or like I said, in some cases, maybe two.
Okay. And another question about those: is it wise to install more than one soil sensor based on the variation of my landscape?
It would depend on just how varied. If you have one area that is just completely turf grass and a second area that is a flower bed or a mixture of trees and shrubs, those may be a bit more of an extreme in terms of different water requirements, and you may benefit from having separate ones. But most often, even in that case, if you're also checking your irrigation schedule and you know that the turf grass is the one that's going to be the one that needs the water more often, you can put your soil sensor in the turf grass, and the trees and shrubs, you can monitor that one a little bit more on your own, or just set your schedule to know that it probably only needs to be irrigated once a week because they don't require water as often.
And it certainly sounds like there's some interest in these soil sensors. I think you mentioned that there's information on the WaterSense webpage about if you were interested in getting one of these their own home, finding the right soil sensor for them.
We do have on the WaterSense website information for both weather-based and soil moisture-based controllers, along with mini reports, which are I think they're about 4 pages each, and they just go over the general information that anyone would need to know about each of these controllers and how they work and what are their benefits.
Last question. Sorry. How do you identify plants that are non-native on properties?
And I see that question as well. That is a bit of a challenge. It a lot of times it may either take a botanist or a plant specialist to really be able to identify some of the more nuanced differences in plants, which I do not have that experience. We do have, like I said, that Identify Native Plants website, or links to that through the WaterSense website, which hopefully can link you to the resources. And all of those resources, or most of them, they do show like pictures of the plants that are native, pictures of plants that may be non-native or invasive. But that is something that I would usually refer to the Agricultural Extension Agency, and they would have a lot more of the resources for identifying, especially in your particular area, which ones are going to be more specifically non-native to you.
Thank you, Julius, so much for the presentation today, and thank you to everyone for joining. And as I said earlier, if you have any questions, please contact us at waterviews@rwater.com. That's WATERVIEWS at RWATER.com. And Julius, do you anything else before we say goodbye for the day?
Thank you again for allowing me to present today, and I'm glad I could provide some information to everyone.
You want actually sorry, we had one last question. On average, how many sprinklers should one have?
And that is a good question for an irrigation professional. It's as with a lot of things, it's going to depend on your landscape, the size of the landscape, and the specific manufacturer of that sprinkler. They range in a distance of a capable distance of, some may only need to have 3 feet of spacing, some can reach as far as 10 or 20 or 50 feet. Um, and so it's really just going to be dependent on all of those conditions.
Julius, again, thank you so much for the presentation. It was fantastic, and we really appreciate the time you took here today.
Great. Thank you as well. And thanks everyone for attending.